Our meeting. When our recording returns, thank you so much for that. We'll now move into our discussions, which will use our normal discussion structure for the PAC. For these conversations, anyone can speak multiple times, but should take no more than about 2 minutes each time they speak. Raise your hand on Zoom and allow the facilitator to call on people in a way that promotes conversation, keeps things moving, and allows everyone to speak. Please remember that facilitators use a weighted stack and will not always call on the first person to raise their hand. Be constructive, look forward, and discuss how to make the commission's work more successful in the future on each question. And so the question at hand is, historical recommendations for Portland's police accountability system. When the IPR was created, or at any point before or after that, were there recommendations that were made, perhaps by some of the groups that members of the PAC and other subcommittees are also involved with, that weren't taken? Should we revisit any of those recommendations as the PAC? What was not taken up that was recommended before? And so that's the conversation at hand. I'm going to stop sharing. And so Dan, you really were prescient and just took us right there. And so, yes.
So, yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, I only have 2 minutes to talk. This is not going to be able to happen. So, but I'll briefly say that the review board that existed before IPR was called the PIIAC, the Portland Internal Investigations Auditing Committee. And it was put into the city code by ballot measure. It was much more of what Commissioner Lloyd described before as a monitoring kind of group, as it implied. It reviewed internal affairs investigations. It was technically it was city council, and they had 13 community advisors who held the original hearings, and then appeals would go to city council. A couple of times, the chief of police refused to agree findings that were made by our elected city council. So that created a crisis, and Mayor Katz put together a work group that the League of Women Voters, and eventually Commissioner Iona and I and a couple other people in the community, including Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, elected Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, were on, who helped design what should have been a stronger police oversight system, but then got taken apart and put into the IPR. And so a bunch of the recommendations that were in that mayor's work group majority report that you can still find online were not implemented. And even though they've been even pushed every time the floor is open to talk about how to make the IPR into a better system, a lot of those got pushed to the side. Some of those are now included in the charter, but some of them are much more detailed, and they definitely are things that are worth revisiting. And I will say specifically that one of the things we put in to try to make a consensus document was having sworn statements from community members when they were making their complaints, and we're trying to get the police association, which was at the table, on board. By doing that, I would not recommend doing that today. So there are some things in that mayor's work group that we can think about, but I'm just telling you right now, I don't think that's a good idea. It's a hurdle for community members to do that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Debbie.
I think it might also be worth looking at. In 2010, it was sort of after the Eileen Luna Fireball report, then they got this stakeholder group together that made a bunch of recommendations that might be worth, it would be a quick look. It's not long or anything. It has they're nicely listed. And then, and then we can look at which ones were accepted and which ones weren't. But yeah, I think that's kind of gives you an indication of what the community members from all the different organizations were interested in at the time.
Beautiful suggestion. Thank you so much. Commissioner Sophia.
Yes, I have a question for the group, just to help myself with the understanding. Is there, or has anyone created, I guess, I want to call it a flow chart of how all the different accountability groups, where they sit, under whom are they managed, or things like that? I just want an org chart, basically, of how these things work together, who does what. Does something like that already exist? I mean, because it would be really helpful for me to organize my thoughts. And as we're trying to get this new commission together, or this new accountability committee together, to understand how it's set up now. I know we had them speak at one of our meetings, but a visual would be much more helpful. That's all.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sophia. Commissioner Lavisa.
Sophia, do you mean specifically for the city of Portland?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Well, one that I have seen that has been really helpful to me is a flow chart that is in a League of Women Voters report. And I think that, I think Debbie might have said that the flow chart actually came from somewhere else. But there is a flow chart that sort of puts together all the pieces of the puzzle, because I agree with you, it is confusing. I'll see if I can find it.
Thank you so much. Additional conversation around this topic. Commissioner Sophia.
So I'm going to ask this question of Dan and Debbie, having this historical knowledge. You know, I know you talked about it a little bit, Dan, but would you be willing to cipher through all those documents about what, you says things to do and things not to do, or what would happen and what didn't happen? That would be nice to know, to see that, because I don't have that knowledge. But anyway, go ahead, Dan. I see you smiling. You're like, yeah, it's a lot of work.
Well, I think you appreciate how much work it is to do those kinds of things. But if it's something that I would help this this commission move forward, I could do my best. I'm pretty sure there's something similar to that exists, but it's kind of a moving. It's when you put it together, whatever that 2010 work group that Commissioner Iona was talking about, that was 12 years ago, and things have changed since then. So you kind of have to go back. You always have to go back and say, okay, well, they did do this a little bit, and sometimes some of it gets implemented, but not exactly the way it was recommended, and it's so you can't really say got implemented. But I can do some of that. Yes, I would be willing to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to, burn the midnight oil or anything, but just if you can just pencil out some of the things that comes up to your head that you found it important, that'll be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sophia and Commissioner Dan. Any other thoughts around this? Any other documents that we should, look at from the past to help inform the future? All right, very good. Thank you for that.
So, Dr. Moses.
Yes, please. Yep, sorry.
So I was scrolling through the IPR's last annual report, because they have something. It's not a flow chart, but it's a It's a chart with little dots in it showing different things that the IPR is able to do, the internal affairs is able to do, the police commanders are able to do, what the police review board does, the chief does, the commissioner, and then arbitrators who are not under the purview of the oversight system we're designing. But that I think it's helpful to look at that chart. So I pasted the link directly to that, just that image in the chat there, and the audience can look at that too. Oh, and while I've had the floor, Commissioner Lloyd, I would say that the system we have now is a hybrid of the investigative and the review system, because the IPR itself only does about 10% of the investigations. The rest of them are done by internal affairs. And then IPR reviews the other ones, and then CRC reviews appeals that are done by both of them. So we have a hybrid system, doesn't really fall easily into one of the categories, but I think the authors of that document from NACOLE, including the first director of the IPR, I think they acknowledge that some are hybrids.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Handeman. Commissioner Debbie.
And beside going on the hybrid, I'm just following up on what Commissioner Handelman just said. So besides the IPR reviewing cases that they didn't actually investigate, and CRC getting to doing some of that too, the CRC actually is supposed to have a recurring audit work group, and they've been pretty inactive in recent years. But when they were functioning, they would pick an issue like dismissals and say, okay, we want to see how IPR is handling dismissals. And so then the staff analyst would select a random selection of files where there had been dismissals, and then the CRC members would read the files and then evaluate whether or not they felt that IPR was using that authority appropriately. And so that was sort of another way that they audited the process.
Very helpful. Thank you so much, Commissioner Debbie. Commissioner Dan.
So I want to make sure this doesn't get lost, that Commissioner Lloyd mentioned a study done by the League of Women Voters just a couple of years ago that outlines recommendations about the current system. So I think that should be on our reading list if it's not already.
I believe that's the one that is posted in the chat. From the League of Women Voters Report on Police Accountability. Yeah, very good. We'll make sure to include that. Thank you. Commissioner Lavisa.
Well, I feel like I would be remiss in asking, are there cop watch reports that we should look at?
I think she was asking me that.
Yeah.
You mean Portland Cop Watch, I assume. Cop Watch is a movement. Just to explain, Cop Watch is a movement. It actually started in Berkeley, California, and so we're a local group that chose that name. It's not a franchise, so we didn't have to get like a McDonald's thing that goes on the wall that says we're an official franchise or anything. But Portland Cop Watch has done a lot of research around this. We did an original proposal when we first started in 1992, which was very similar to what ended up in the mayor's work group. So that's why I didn't bring it up, because it's pretty similar to that later work. And then, to quote a former IPR director, you could take all of our 86 issues of our newsletter and staple them together and kind of read the whole history of what's happened in the oversight system. I don't think I want to make everybody on this committee, on this commission, read all 86 issues of our newsletter. We've made lots of recommendations over the years. If there's something that I can pull out that's easily digestible, I'll try to do that. But I think the role of Portland Cop Watch's research in this commission will be exactly the kind of thing I'm telling you tonight. Like, this is what's happened in the past. These are some of the things that had got recommended that got put in and didn't. What Commissioner Glenn was asking about. Can you make a list of those? What got incorporated and what didn't? So if I think of something else, of course I'll bring it up.
Thank you so much. Staff have put the 86 issues of the newsletter into the into the chat. So that's very helpful. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to move us on to our next conversation. I'm going to share my screen again. Could be the wrong screen. Do we see a PowerPoint? Yes, okay, very good. Ideas for inclusion into the two documents. Areas of agreement on best practices, best fit from other jurisdictions and areas of agreement on suggestions to consider from experts and academics. So we'd love to have a conversation around these two different questions. So let's start with the first one, areas of agreement on best practices, best fit from other jurisdictions. Thoughts around that? Commissioner Dan.
I have a clarifying question. Obviously, we haven't done the research into these other, so you're just saying what kinds of things are we trying to get from them? Yeah, because I was thinking about this, that it would be great if we're going to do this research, that we have like a list of questions that everybody asks to those different jurisdictions, so we get back the same kind of information. I think some of them, as I said, like what you call, Dr. Moses, the snowballing effect, some of us will come up with follow-up questions that may not be exactly the same in every case, but hopefully by sharing information, if we need to double back, we can do that too. So I think some of the questions I think that we need to ask will pertain to, in what way are community members involved in your oversight system? Are they paid? And if so, how? How do they break down their time? And are they doing reviews of every single complaint that comes forward, which isn't exactly what's envisioned for this new board, but could be what they're supposed to do. And there's right now 300 or 400 complaints a year, so that could be very time consuming. So those kinds of questions I think are some that we can use as part of the basis.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Debbie.
So it seems like we've kind of listed a lot of those different things in that, is it called scope and agenda document? I felt like we sort of thought through all of the different things we need to figure out. And then, so one would think that that could inspire the questions we want to ask the people in these different jurisdictions, like how many people are on your board? How many times do they meet in a month? Or, all those kinds of things that it seems like if we looked at that list, that might lead us to some questions, a standardized list of questions that when we reach out to the different jurisdictions, we can make sure to get the answers to those, so we can, and then also ask them, like, do you think it works well to have 10 members on your commission or whatever, because they ask them to kind of evaluate how they feel whatever it is they're doing is working. Okay, thanks.
Great suggestions. Thank you so much, Commissioner Debbie. Commissioner Dan.
Is anybody else looking at that scope and agenda document? Because we can easily kind of make a list right off of that. Do you have access to all the records that you need? How do you compel officer testimony? What's the case workflow for investigations? How do you propose policy changes? Let's see, some of these are things that Commissioner Iona already talked about. What's your budget? How do you make public reports? What's included in your public reports? I think those are ones that jump out to me while I'm just running my finger through that document.
And staff have put the document into the chat. So it's really helpful. So a thought is to review this document and to see if there are additional questions that this subcommittee may want to add to that. And then finalize it and then move forward in order to be able to do the research. Commissioner Debbie.
So I just have a question. So, because I'm always a little bit confused about how much we're allowed to talk to people. So would it be possible, not in violation of the law, for two people who are on the commission, on the subcommittee, to put their heads together and come up with a list of questions based on that scope and agenda to then forward on to the group for discussion and finalization, just so we don't have to do it. It's a little awkward doing it in this, doing little thing, minor jobs like that in this sort of setting. So I'm just curious if we can get an answer to whether or not that would be something that we'd be allowed to do.
Yes. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Sarah Ames, and that would be fine. To meet, to have, dispatch a couple people to work together and bring something back to the subcommittee.
Great. I think that would make it a lot faster and easier to come up with something within a small, like two people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you. Commissioner Angie.
I just want to make sure I understand. So we're taking the information from the structure and details and trying to create questions from that in the scope and agenda, just because I'm looking at the scope and agenda document right now. And I do remember Debbie and Dan coming up with all those questions previously. And I'm just trying to understand which section of the scope and agenda that we're talking about.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie.
So the group will have to decide this, but it seems to me that now we've got this list of jurisdictions that we're interested in, learning about. So if we kind of split those up and contacted them, and it seems like it'd be more useful if we all ask the same questions and things that we need to know about, so that we will have the information we need of kind of what works well and what doesn't work well in other jurisdictions to kind of put into the pot for consideration here in Portland for our system. So that's sort of what I was sort of imagining, but obviously it's up to the group.
Commissioner Debbie, I believe that Commissioner Angie was asking about what section of the document, what particular questions. She's agreeing that, yes, that is a great place to start, but what area of that document does she need to look at?
Okay, so I'm not looking at it right now. So I'm not sure I can answer that, but maybe Lovisa or Commissioner Handelman are taking a look at it right now.
Very good, Commissioner Lovisa. Thank you.
Sure, I did just pull it up, but I'm not looking at it right now. I think that this is in general a great idea. We had already had generally the idea that the way the subcommittee would work was that we would split up these jurisdictions, and that everybody would take a jurisdiction, pick a jurisdiction that we're particularly interested in, and go do the research about it. And co-chairs had a bit of a conversation about how do we bring this information back to the group. My only concern is time, in terms of like the number of meetings that we have. I'm a little worried that we don't really have a lot of time. If we have 4 meetings and we're hoping to have a document done by the 4th meeting, and this is the first meeting, then that means we have 2 other meetings where we can have discussion and where we can bring research back to the group to share. And so I'm a little worried about spending a meeting on or spending time between a meeting focusing on developing questions as opposed to getting some of the research done to share next time. But I also want to do the research in a meaningful way. So if people have ideas about that, please share.
Commissioner Dan?
Yes, thank you. I think what I suggested before might work if we take the list of questions that we come out of this meeting with, and people start doing some research, and then if we realize that we forgot some questions, you know, the people who are doing that research could add those to their list, and or if other people find them, we can bring it back to the next meeting, and then people can maybe double back to those jurisdictions and ask those other questions. So that way we're not held up in this, you know, short timeline that we're giving ourselves. I think two questions that we should ask, three questions we should ask to everybody is, what are barriers that you're facing? What would, if you add other powers and authorities to your board, what would you like to add? And is there anybody else we should talk to? Which is what we talked about being one question a little earlier.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Dan.
I raised my hand again. I know.
Okay.
I may not have looked at my, but
Sorry.
I
Taking
think
notes.
a question for Silver in the chat, in the Q&A, and I think it would be a good idea for those of us doing the calls to these jurisdictions to do a little research first, what we can learn from the NACOLE paperwork from those cities' own websites. But if you try to understand how our system works by just reading the documents that IPR and the city have on their website versus actually go experience it and live through it, you would never understand. Right? It just, you know, the what's written on paper and how things really work aren't always the same, or aren't easy to understand. Those nuances. So that's why I think it's important for us to, you know, maybe do some of that basic, you know, paperwork research, but to actually talk to people also.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Lavisa, kind of putting this in your court, thinking about how you would like to move forward. Or I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. The next question I'm going to share. Wrong thing. Is areas of agreement on suggestions to consider from experts and academics. Is your hand up again? Commissioner Dan, okay. Areas of agreement on suggestions to consider from experts and academics. Commissioner Sophia.
Yes, I am trying to wrap my head around what it is we're needing to do. I got the question, right? Are we putting these together? Are we reviewing what we have already to decide what we're going to agree on, what should be done today, or are we just discussing that? I think I'm just a little confused. Is exactly what we're doing. Maybe I just got an airhead moment, so help me understand. Thank you.
I think what I'm asking is, are there any items you'd like to see the commission consider as a best practice or as a best fit from other jurisdictions or from academics? So Commissioner Lavisa.
Oh, sorry, my response is not about that
Oh,
question.
that's okay. But I'm going to try and defer to you.
Sure.
We're in sync.
Sure. Well, I did want to bring up, all right, so right now we're in the fact-finding phase, just, you know, looking back at the agenda and scope document, you know, we're in fact-finding right now. And then the next phase is the establishing powers and duties phase. So what we do in this phase should inform what we do in the establishing powers and duty phase. And I think that means getting really clear on looking at what type of system, what we really want this system to look like. And I think that the original idea or the original conception of this subcommittee was more focused on literature review and with the possibility of, finding experts who we invite to speak possibly. Yeah, and I think that just in terms of time, I just don't know that we're going to have time to get people on the phone for like 20 different jurisdictions to give us meaningful answers. And I don't know if we really have time to build out enough of a structure for that data to come back in a meaningful way. So I guess those are my concerns.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Lavisa. Commissioner Monica.
It's I think and I would be happy to do an internet search and find departments and universities where they have maybe a social work department that has a focus on police accountability, a department on police accountability. Somewhere UPenn, I think, has one, and there's other universities that we could get a hold of somebody in academia that has some opinions. How many, I mean, as a, I would, let's say, identify myself as I'm a commissioner for the Police Accountability Committee in Portland, Oregon, and I can ask these scripted questions, or I have to ask those scripted questions, or can I just, ad lib and see what happens and what happens, what a conversation gets to naturally. I'm trying to figure out how much of this has to be under control, or how much of this is maybe limited by the scope of my position as a commissioner. I'm still confused about how much I can say, or how much I can ask, or what kind of information I can grab.
Commissioner Lavisa.
Sure, I just want to, clarify again that the goal of the subcommittee is not is not primarily to do interviews. It's primarily to
Just
look at literature, look at what we already have, and go from there. Like I said, I'm definitely not averse to people making recommendations to bring people in to
Gotcha.
talk, but I do think that we have to coordinate there. There's coordination with staff. There's a lot of things that come up once we start talking to people.
Mhm.
Commissioner Angie. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lavisa, are you good? Okay, Commissioner Angie.
Did you want to say something? You look like you wanted to say something.
Me?
I'm sorry, I thought you wanted to continue. Okay, so I'm just trying to understand the structure and help make clarity for everybody. So are we talking about dividing and conquering? And okay, everybody takes a different piece of literature, then we come back together and we talk. Okay, that makes sense to me. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding what we were talking about. Okay, thank you.
So Commissioner Monica, and then I think we're going to keep moving on to the next steps.
Mm-hmm. So instead of picking up the phone or writing emails to somebody, what we would be doing, like if I decide that I want to look at academia and I want to look for research papers and things that have been published on this topic, and then bring that to the table. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Commissioner Sophia.
I'm still clarifying things in my head, so I'm talking through it with the group, so you guys can correct me if I go off the rails a little bit. So I'm going to use my words, and I'm going to say, so what are we doing? We're creating this big literature review. I'm going to be academic about it. we're doing a literature review on all the things that we can find. This is our sort of our fact finding phase. So I want to just kind of ask, is that what we're doing? And then the second question is, if that's what we're doing, this information that we find is going to, I'm going to open up the document real quick so I can say the right term. We're going to use that information from our fact-finding phase to establish our powers and duties. So that's how it's going, right? All right, got it.
So I'm going to give the floor to Commissioner Lavisa because we're going to move into the next step and there's going to be some clarity here too.
Okay, sorry everyone for the confusion about this. Yeah, in terms of dividing and conquering, I think that's an apt way of looking at it. We have a lot of jurisdictions that we've already mentioned that we're interested in looking at, and I think the questions that Commissioner Handlin mentioned, and I think just the agenda and scope, kind of related questions that we talked about are great. Those are great framing questions in terms of like what it is that we're looking at or looking for in terms of each jurisdiction. What we were hoping to do was to have everyone volunteer for a jurisdiction or a couple of jurisdictions that they were particularly interested in. And we'll do this again, I think at the next meeting in regards to individual experts. But just we'll be asking people to volunteer for a jurisdiction that you would like to take a look at the information about. It can be academic, it can be non-academic, it can be reviews, studies, reports, whatever you find that you think is germane. But taking a look at it and then at the next meeting doing maybe bringing what you have found back to this subcommittee and doing a maybe 5 minutes presentation, just a brief presentation, because we have so many jurisdictions that we've mentioned that we're interested in and that we want to cover, bringing that information back kind of in a digestible way, so that you can share it with the subcommittee so that we can ideally start to draft that areas of agreement document once we've gotten a lot of these good ideas from various jurisdictions. Does that make sense? Okay, so do we have volunteers for, oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
I want to say thank you so much for being a chair of this committee, not by choice. I know you weren't, Lisa, so thank you for all the work that you've done so far. I know this is not easy and it takes time, so thank you so much. I do have Commissioner Debbie Iona's previous questions that she together when we were making that list for the scope and agenda, and I really think that I'm not trying to just butter you up, Debbie, at all, but I really think her list of questions are super solid, and I would like to share them with the committee because I think while reading through our documents, it's kind of good to have like, okay, I want to take note of this and that and report back. So maybe I already shared it with staff, but I think I might share it with everybody on this subcommittee so we can kind of, because it's just bulleted points and it's probably about 20 different questions that she formulated related to doing this research. So, and which I think are really solid questions. So thank you.
And Commissioner Monica says, would you send it via email, please? Thank you. All right, Commissioner Dan.
Well, I just want another clarifying point, I guess. I have been doing this kind of research for a very long time, 30 unfortunately long years. And I can't stress enough how little I have learned by reading other people's websites to try to find out what their boards are like and what they actually do. And that I feel like it would be really important to do calls and interviews. And if that's, I think my look at the list, I think there's 15 boards, and if there's 5 of us officially on the subcommittee, that means each one only has to take 3. I don't think that's a huge thing to ask each of us to do, to look at 3 cities each. I'm willing to take on a few more if that makes it easier. But I really, again, I like if you looked at that flow chart that the IPR gave us when they came to talk to us, yeah, exactly. You would be like, I don't understand what that means. How does our system work? You just walk away without any clue of what's going on. So I think it's really important to talk to somebody to find out the more details that we're going to need. And just to be really clear, I put this in the chat, but I was looking at both the powers and duties phase and the structure and details phase, because otherwise we're going to have to go back twice to all these boards to ask some of these questions. So I think we should ask around both of those areas of the next 2 phases.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Anyone else? Commissioner Debbie.
Do we have to talk to all of them? I was wondering if we could, you know, look at it at all of them online and then pick like half or you know, a decent number, not feel like we have to talk to every single one. Maybe if we got to 10 or something, it might make the load a little bit lighter.
Commissioner Lavisa.
Sure, yeah, I want to say I think that's a great idea, and I want to say I appreciate very much Commissioner Handelman's suggestions and recommendations on this, and I think that there is a phenomenal amount of power and like clarifying power in terms of talking to and hearing from an actual human person. I think, yeah, the way I would frame this is that document review is required. I would say that is sort of like the minimum standard. And also in terms of what Debbie just mentioned, we have so many jurisdictions on our list that it may make a lot more sense for us to kind of do the doc review on everyone, get a general sense, you know, use studies, use meta studies. You know, you can look at media if you want. You can look at news, just anything that'll help you kind of get more of a handle on how this thing is actually working and impacting people. But you're not limited to that. You know, you can definitely coordinate with chairs and with staff if you would like to do more. And, you know, by that I mean, like, if you're interested in, like, you know, reaching out and communicating directly, we're definitely open to that. But I think at the basic foundation of what we would like to do at the very least is look at this doc review, so that all of these things, you know, like previous reports, like previous recommendations that, you know, have already been made, and other people have already done a ton of this work, and we stand on the shoulders of giants very much, and so we just don't want any of that work to go, you know, unreviewed, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel on everything.
Thank you, Commissioner Lavisa. Any other thoughts? Commissioner Debbie?
It maybe we'll want to prioritize. I mean, I don't know what kind of models these 15 have, but it maybe we'd want to, as far as the ones to talk to, we might want to prioritize ones where they're primarily conducting independent investigations through a civilian agency, because that's what where we're headed.
Thank you.
I definitely agree. I just wanted to, I think, jump in and ask, can we have some volunteers for some of these jurisdictions that we've mentioned already? And maybe staff can put the slide back up on the screen. But I think Angie, maybe you had mentioned something very specific. So yeah, I just wanted to give people a chance to call dibs on their favorites if they would like. And if people would like to get together in groups of 2, you are certainly welcome to. But I know we have a lot of jurisdictions to cover, and I think 6 people on this subcommittee right now.
Thank you. Commissioner Debbie.
So I'd be interested in doing Oakland, but now when I looked at that slide, I only saw like 7 or something. Is that right?
Yeah, I
That's
think
correct. It doesn't have the ones that were said today because it's like
Okay.
prepared in advance of today's meeting.
yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Commissioner Dan? Commissioner Debbie,
I-
is Oakland the only one you want to do?
I'd like to see the rest of the list so I can decide what I want for a second one. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. I can share that. Commissioner Dan.
I'd like to look at San Diego County, San Diego City, and New York City. And I'm a little confused. Can somebody explain, is there a legal reason for us not to call these people directly as commissioners, as public officials who are assigned to do this work? Why do we have to coordinate calling with staff and the chairs? I'm not understanding that.
I do not have an answer to that.
Sure. Well, okay. Well, I would need to go back and check it, but we do have an internal processes document, and so I think that whatever we do, I do think it has to be in sort of in compliance with our own internal processes document about how we do things.
Dan, could you tell me your 3 again? You said New York City.
San Diego County and San Diego City.
Thank you.
Angie, could you remind me what you had mentioned before?
Is Minneapolis, and it does seem that Dan knows a lot more about it than I do. I mean, Dan and Debbie are going to know so much more about all of these things than I do. So if there's a breadcrumb trail that either of you want to share, that would be so helpful for me. I mean, I could go and do cold web browsing, for sure, but I don't know if it would be a very good use of my time. If there's another way for me to do this, or all of us to do this, that would be a more efficient use of our time. Please let me know.
Thank you so much, Angie, and I just want to say your work is valuable.
So we have San Diego County, the city of San Diego, we have the city of New York, the city of Oakland, and we have the city of Minneapolis. Anybody want to love Denver? Debbie?
I'd be happy to do Denver.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Commissioner Monica?
I honestly have no preference because I have, I'm going to start, like Andrew said, I'm going to start from scratch and do my best. So whatever you guys want me to do, I will do. I do like Dan's question about guidance, about how we reach out, what we can say, what we can ask would be super helpful, because I'm still confused about what can I say, what can I ask, how do I identify myself, and what exactly is the job I am doing, so that I can be clear and I'm not breaking any rules.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Monica. It's Commissioner Sophia.
Oh, okay. I wanted to, because I added a couple cities of Columbus, Ohio, and I think it was, and I'll have to be, when I get it, I'll let you know if it's Dallas or Fort Worth.
Right. I got that. Yep.
And also looking into what the NAACP has.
Right.
So.
And I want to say that we will follow up with information and guidance on what to say and how to say it. you will receive guidance on this. And so I'm going to give us one last minute before we move on to public comment. Any other thoughts?
Have we had a, oh, sorry. Have we had a volunteer for Philadelphia yet?
We do not.
Okay, I'm happy to
Maybe
volunteer
Monica
for Philadelphia.
I was gonna say Philadelphia.
and San Francisco, I think, are both not taken.
I'll do Philadelphia.
Okay. That's Commissioner Sophia, is that right? Thank you so much. Commissioner Dan and then Commissioner Monica.
Oh, I didn't realize my phone is unmuted. Well, I can also call San Francisco or look at San Francisco. I said call because I'm still thinking about that. So if I had a better idea how these 4 meetings are spaced out, I'm thinking maybe I can agree to Commissioner Lloyd's paperwork only until we figure out how we're allowed to call people. If we pledge to come back to the next meeting and talk about calling them, because I think that it's really going to give us the information we need. But maybe we can just do this paper stuff between meeting 1 and meeting 2, and then we can make calls between meeting 2 and meeting 3. That would be my suggestion about how we can break this log jam.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Angie, and then Commissioner Lavisa, you'll take us out.
Dan, if you don't mind, I will take San Francisco because that is the jurisdiction of my my problem. So I've been in contact with them before, and I'll take a look at that. It would be very satisfying, or not satisfying, very cleansing for me to take a look at that jurisdiction. So thank you. And if you want to work together, we can also on that one. So.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Angie. Commissioner Lavisa.
All right, thank you everyone so much. Has anybody mentioned a jurisdiction during this meeting that has not been mentioned at the end or has not had a volunteer? We just want to make sure nothing is falling through the cracks. And if you think of other jurisdictions or find other jurisdictions, you're absolutely welcome to do the same, do some research on them. And again, what we're hoping to do in between this meeting and the next meeting, and I'll tell you, Dan, the meetings will be usually roughly spaced about 2 weeks apart, roughly. And co-chairs, well, singular co-chairs and staff will take your recommendations under advisement, and we'll see if we can talk about that. And I appreciate that suggestion. But yes, yeah, for your jurisdiction, please go ahead and look at what's available, look at the literature, look at the reviews, look at the studies. If there's DOJ stuff, feel free to look at that. And if you can bring back just a quick 5 minutes on the jurisdiction for the next meeting, that's the homework assignment here.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Dan, I'm trying to give public comment.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, I was looking at the question in the chat, and I know for sure that Oakland had the federal investigation going on there. I also was thinking humorously that there may be Yelp reviews for some of these boards.
Thanks. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move us on. Thank you so very much for that. What a great conversation this evening. So I would like to open the, oh my goodness, so sorry to do this. Public comment is now available on the issues of the PAC that the PAC is discussing, or community members can also tell their story about policing and police accountability. We ask that members of the public to keep their comments or questions to 2 minutes in length at most, and raise their hand in Zoom if you would like to speak. So I will see if there are any participants, attendees who have raised their hands who would like to speak. Very good. Thank you so much. We'll now recap the garden plot instead of the parking lot. And I really like the garden plot recap because in the garden plot, they can grow and they can be nurtured. So I'm wanting to check with staff to see if there is anything in this evening's garden plot that needs to be addressed, mentioned.
Well, we've got that process question that came up before, which with relation to communication outside, which co-chair Lloyd already mentioned we would follow up on. There's a question about funding structure with relation to what we're allowed to do, and perhaps communication about what parameters have already been set by virtue of ballot measure 26-217 that already constrain what other jurisdiction attributes might be relevant to this conversation. There's a lot of links that need to get circulated around and lists as well from documents that have been referenced also. And I believe that's everything. Wrote it down.
That's what I have down also. Thank you so much for letting us double check on the garden plot. So that brings, all right, Commissioner Monica.
I noticed that I ended up without a jurisdiction or a city. So I'm going to look for organizations that are focusing on this topic and see what I can find as in social justice movements and things of that sort where they could kind of guide us.
I have you down as Philly.
Oh,
Philadelphia.
I thought somebody else signed up for Philadelphia. Okay, I'll do Philadelphia.
Okay, and feel free to look into social justice organizations also.
I was born in Philadelphia, so that works. Randomly born in
goodness.
Philadelphia. Yeah.
How wonderful. Commissioner Dan.
Yeah, I just want to say that when I was saying it's like a moving information when you try to look things up online, a lot of changes happen. I'm sure this is probably obvious, but a lot of changes happen since the George Floyd uprising. So there are a lot of places that have either worked to change or improve or somehow other put new systems in place. So even the San Diego City board that I was familiar with isn't exactly what it was. It's in transition now. So just be aware that some of the research we're going to be doing is going to be in flux.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Commissioner Angie.
Thank you. And I only want to take a minute or so, but I do want to speak as a community member, not as a commission member, in that tomorrow is the 48th anniversary since James Guerra was killed by police in San Francisco. So, and that was my biological father. And I am not trying to I do not want sympathy, but I do want to tell my story because this work is so important. It's so important to me, and I know it's so important to everybody on this committee, but if my story can help this committee at all, that's why I want to share it. So thank you.
Thank you so very much, Commissioner Angie. So Commissioner Sophia, you're closing us out.
I just wanted to say, Monica, I did say Philadelphia, but you are so worthy of it.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. My
That's
bad.
okay. You're so worthy. You can have it. It sounds like you'll do a better job than me.
Okay, thank you so much. Staff.
I just wanted to add one other thing to the garden plot. There was an attribute of one, a request for discussion time for worst practices from other jurisdictions as well as best. Just wanted to make sure that didn't get lost. I'll let you move on after that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So I would like to thank everyone for your contribution today. Thank you also to the interpreters supporting access to the meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and its subcommittees for all Portlanders. Thank you to the members of the public for being here and contributing your questions and thoughts. You can give written public comment in advance of future meetings at tinyurl.com/Portland PAC comment. Please sign up for email updates on the Police Accountability Commission at tinyurl.com/Portland PAC updates. Thank you, everyone, and good evening. It is now 9:01.